The young anchor reported from the funeral hall of a Seoul hospital. It was the funeral of the president of K Electronics and his wife, who had been tragically killed in an automobile accident. A young woman nearby couldn't stop sobbing as she held the hand of a 10-year-old boy. He was the son of the deceased, Taejun. The boy held on with all his might, refusing to cry in front of the strangers and reporters who would not stop shouting questions about the details of the crash. The flashing camera lights blinded the grieving relatives. Taejun could hardly breathe. He didn't understand why these people wouldn't leave them alone or let them say goodbye to their parents in private. Later, sitting in the car, Taejun asked his grandfather what sentence the surviving driver had received. The boy wanted the person responsible for his parents' death to be punished as severely as possible. His grandfather, Kim Ja-pil, replied that the driver would likely only serve 1 to 2 years in jail. This news ignited a fire in the boy. He began yelling that it was unfair, that the driver should be imprisoned for life or executed. He demanded his grandfather take action, but the old man replied that despite his own hatred, their social status demanded they show forgiveness. His aunt held an umbrella over him and tried to explain the order of things, but Taejun pushed her away. He ran into the rain, screaming that he didn't care about social status. He shouted that he would curse that man for the rest of his life. As guards tried to catch him, the child ran in tears, thinking that despite his family's wealth, the most precious thing had been stolen from him. Drenched to the skin, he ran toward the staff housing. Wiping his face with his sleeve, he suddenly heard a little girl's voice. It was the daughter of the driver. She was crying, wondering why her daddy wasn't home yet. Taejun stood there, glaring menacingly at the innocent girl. He felt a burning hatred for her and her entire family. He swore then that he would never forgive her. 20 years had passed since that tragedy. In a high-end restaurant, a woman, Taejun's aunt, waited for her nephew. Soon, a tall, sturdy, and strikingly handsome man appeared, Taejun. He had grown into a man of great beauty and health, now serving as the director of a K Electronics service center. His aunt admired him, suggesting it was time for him to marry. Taejun joked that he would follow her example and stay single for life. She complained that he should have stayed in the US for another year to secure a higher promotion, but Taejun insisted he needed to experience the front lines of customer sales. At the service center, the office was bustling. So-eun was working her heart out, trying to serve an elderly lady who couldn't see well. So-eun had been exhausted lately, having returned to work after a month-long vacation that she couldn't explain to anyone. In the staff room, she sat alone with her thoughts. She wasn't feeling well, but she cheered herself up with the thought that she had helped save a life. She'd lived unhappily for 27 years until Hyuk and his family appeared. They had treated her like their own daughter, and she wanted to be a real member of their family. However, a few months ago, the bitter truth began to surface. During a medical exam, Hyuk noticed So-eun had type O blood. He started crying, claiming his mother had liver cancer and desperately needed a type O donor, but no one in the family was a match. So-eun, wanting to repay their kindness, volunteered to be the donor. Hyuk sobbed with happiness, and his parents promised a grand wedding as soon as she recovered. The surgery was a success. The doctors removed 60% of So-eun's wound. While recovering, So-eun went to the hospital to visit Hyuk's mother. As she approached the room, she heard Hyuk talking to his mother. He was describing a beautiful woman from a well-to-do family he met at work. His mother encouraged him to visit the girl's parents, saying So-eun wasn't right for him. Hyuk smirked and told his mother that he only used So-eun to get her liver, because a girl from a good family would never agree to such a surgery. So-eun stood in the hallway, horrified, covering her mouth to stifle her sobs. She couldn't believe they had used her so cruelly. Back at the office, So-eun's colleague, Bo-bae, asked if she wanted to go to lunch. So-eun declined, her heart heavy with the realization of Hyuk's deception. She remembered how he used to say he wanted to marry her and be her first man, all while planning to discard her. Even now, Hee-wook was bombarding her with texts, asking her to cook specific recipes for his mother, masterfully manipulating her. Suddenly, a light tap on her desk broke her trance. So-eun shuddered and wiped her glasses to see a tall, exceptionally handsome man standing before her. It was Taejun. He asked why she wasn't at lunch, glancing at her name tag. This was the first time So-eun had seen someone so handsome in the company. When the head of HR introduced him as the new director, So-eun immediately stood to greet him. Taejun told her not to worry about formalities, but seemed concerned. He told her she needed to eat a full meal to do a good job, not just a salad. So-eun hoped he would leave quickly so she could deal with her private pain, but Taejun stood his ground. After a moment of thought, he looked at her firmly and told her to follow him immediately. The girl was trying to keep up with the men and wondered why she had been called along, worried that it might have something to do with her long vacation. Taejun and his colleagues stood at the elevator in silence. So-eun kept thinking that this was all so strange. Why would the head personally talk to her? She visualized him scolding her and then firing her on the spot. Upon entering the elevator, the awkward silence continued. Taejun decided to ask her how long she had been working at the company and if she liked everything about it. He wondered why she had decided to join K Electronics in the first place. So-eun felt like she was at her first job interview and began to think feverishly about how to make a self-presentation to her boss. Taejun continued to question her about her family, asking where and who she lived with. The girl said she was living on her own. Finally, they arrived at the right floor. So-eun looked around. It was her first time on this floor since her department was at the very bottom. They approached his office and the man asked her to wait outside for a moment. Finally, a man came out holding a bag of food. Taejun said she was the only one who hadn't had lunch yet, so she needed a good meal. As luck would have it, grilled eel rice was So-eun's favorite dish. Her eyes lit up with anticipation, and she couldn't believe her happiness. She looked at the head of the company as if she were an angel. She thought that despite his high position, he was a very nice and considerate person. Taejun was glad he could do a good deed for this girl. Suddenly, the man asked So-eun if they had met somewhere before. He brought his face close to her and scrutinized her closely. So-eun thought to herself that he was incredibly handsome. His blue eyes could drive anyone crazy, and his expensive suit fit him perfectly. A slight blush came to her cheeks. She was embarrassed at how intently he was looking at her. The man stared at her in silence, and then turned around and wished her well. So-eun tried to get her feet out of there and eat her lunch as quickly as possible. Taejun turned around and looked her way. A pass with So-eun's name dangled behind her. He recognized her. It was definitely her, Han So-eun. She had graduated from college and immediately taken a job at K Electronics, an employee with good character and good team relations. From the head of HR, Taejun learned that So-eun had taken an unpaid vacation for a month traveling abroad. He wondered why she had to go abroad for so long. Then he reminisced about his last trip. Taejun stood at the window and looked out at the night city. He remembered when a girl appeared behind him and asked her to end their relationship. He had said he was tired of their constant fighting, that he tried to do everything for her but didn't know what else she needed. The girl trembled, tears running down her cheeks, and screamed that every time he drank, he called for some other girl, even in his sleep. It was always the same name, So-eun. The girl said she wouldn't stand for it anymore and ran out of the room in tears. The man lay back in his chair and began to reminisce about his childhood. He remembered the little girl with pigtails who was always teased by him. Taejun was a little older than her and always won his arguments, but the girl never gave up hope of beating him. She would cry and beg him to play with her again. As a boy, he didn't like tears, and this girl cried a lot and picked on him. No matter how much he hurt her feelings, she always wanted to play with him again. He often wondered what had become of her, where and how she lived. Taejun requested to gather information about her. He was told she was raised by her aunt until she came of age. Her father had left the country and lived in the Philippines, and she currently worked at K Electronics. He was surprised that she had taken a job with our company. He thought it was strange. Taejun decided it was time for him to go back to Korea. And now he was standing in his office. He had finally found her. He wondered where she had gone for a month, and if she had gone to see her father. Taejun decided to check her social media, but he couldn't find any pictures from her vacation. Suddenly, he found her engagement ring photo. He didn't see that coming. The man remembered there was a framed picture of a man on her desk. Evidently, it was her fiancé. The man smirked, thinking her life was shaping up. Interestingly, a new plan was already brewing in his head. CEO Gab-soo met Taejun at a restaurant, trying to ingratiate himself to the young man. The cunning man showered him with compliments, saying that after he gained experience in management, he would be transferred to the headquarters. He wondered why Taejun didn't stay another year abroad as planned, to which the man replied that he wasn't used to waiting around. The young man looked at the CEO confidently and said that now that he had been given a position, he would do something really useful for the company. It sounded like a challenge. Taejun knew that 20 years after his father's death, it hadn't taken long for the company to erase almost all traces of him and everything he'd done for it. But a lot had changed since then. Taejun had grown up, and things would go clearly according to his plan. The office building glistened in the morning sunlight. Taejun arrived at work. When he entered the office, he saw that So-eun was at her desk before everyone else. Taejun thoughtfully drank his coffee while the director told him that there was nothing to worry about. This office was just a small service center that was functioning fine. The director smiled slightly and lowered his voice to say that visitors to this center like to come in to get their gadgets fixed for free, as they don't want to spend money on new ones. "This is not very profitable for our company," he said. "If you fix their gadgets too well, people will stop coming back and buying new ones." So he asked employees not to do a great job and to just be friendly so customers would come back. He said that Taejun also didn't need to spend his energy and intelligence trying to improve the office. Outwardly, Taejun was calm, pretending to agree with the director, but he thought that the mean man was telling him to mind his own business. The young man realized that the director mistook him for a child from a rich family who got the position because he is the grandson of the president of the company and knows nothing. Taejun decided to remain calm, but he was angry that the company employed such people. So-eun was approached by a woman who had a broken cell phone. She was very sad because it had been working for 10 years and then it broke. The woman begged her to fix it as it held a lot of memories and information. So-eun had to say that this phone was a very old model and could not be repaired, but the woman began to cry, asking her to come up with something because there were so many memorable photographs. So-eun felt sorry for her and said that she would try to help the woman and at least make a backup. She told the woman not to worry and went to the repair room. To back up the phone, it had to be charged first. While So-eun was waiting, she glanced at her own phone, thinking about the fact that Hee-wook hadn't texted her since yesterday, even though he had promised to take her out to dinner. She thought about calling him or texting him, then decided not to do it. If he could, he would have contacted her by now, but she really wanted to know what he was up to, so she decided to check his social media. Unexpectedly, So-eun saw a photo on his profile with colleagues, among whom was a girl. It was the same girl, Hyunji, that Hee-wook and his mother were discussing in the hospital. She was very beautiful and sweet. It was clear she grew up in a complete, loving family. One could say she was without flaws. Suddenly, So-eun's thoughts were interrupted by a scream. The phone next to her caught fire. The fire spread very quickly, and it became increasingly difficult to breathe. Screams of fire could be heard everywhere. So-eun remembered the fire extinguisher and ran for it. Luckily, she was able to put out the fire in time. Suddenly, she felt dizzy and her eyes blurred. She started to lose her balance, but felt someone take her under his arm. So-eun saw a terrified Taejun in front of her. He was yelling for her to come to her senses. After the incident, Taejun scolded the guilty employees. The main blame was placed on So-eun because she was distracted while working and did not notice the ignition. The subordinates apologized, and the man allowed everyone to disperse. The director asked So-eun to stay late. He wanted to talk to her separately. The girl went over and apologized again for her negligence. She felt he was very angry and was afraid she might be fired. So-eun said that she would accept any punishment from him. Taejun asked if she had any idea what kind of punishment he had in mind. The girl guessed disciplinary action. The man smirked contentedly. He felt like teasing her a bit. As I said before, well, you'll have to wait for it. So-eun was in a stupor and didn't know what to say. Taejun let her go and said he wouldn't forget about the incident. K Group is a dream job for many job seekers. So-eun had worked hard and sacrificed her sleep to get this job. She felt very bad. The operation had been difficult for her, and she had to return to work after just a month. Because she was afraid that she might be fired due to her long vacation, she tried to work harder than the other employees. Her co-workers were quietly heading home. So-eun really missed Hee-wook. She looked at the time and realized he should have gone home by now, so she decided to call him. She dialed his number, but suddenly a young female voice answered the phone. So-eun was alarmed. She asked who it was. It was Hyunji. She said that Hee-wook had left his cell phone at work and asked what to tell him. So-eun asked her to tell him she wanted to have dinner with him, so he'd call her. Hyunji replied that they were having a company dinner tonight and invited So-eun, saying all of his co-workers had been wanting to meet his girlfriend for a long time. So-eun was excited. Hee-wook had never invited her to sit with his friends before. Hyunji said she would text the address and said goodbye. So-eun thought Hyunji was very nice. After work, Se-yoon pondered how best she could get to the restaurant. Suddenly, an expensive black car pulled up to her. Tae-yoon got out and, with a nonchalant look, told her to get in the car. Se-yoon was a little shocked. He held the door for her and waited. The girl hesitated, not knowing what to do. The man said he was just giving her a ride home. Se-yoon thought she hadn't heard correctly, since when does the director give rides to his employees? The man said that he lived next to her, so they were on the same path. Se-yoon thanked him and said she wasn't going home but to a restaurant. Tae-yoon asked for the address and said he was on his way there anyway. The girl was confused, not understanding why he so insistently wanted to give her a ride. "What's wrong? Hurry up and get in," said Tae-yoon in an almost commanding tone. Se-yoon got into the car and began to tremble with excitement. She didn't understand why the director was doing this. Maybe he wanted to talk to her about her punishment. After getting into the car, the man asked the girl for her exact address and ordered the driver to go. For a while, they rode in awkward silence. Suddenly, Tae-yoon asked if the girl had a boyfriend. Se-yoon was surprised at this question. She thought the man was overstepping his boundaries a bit, but he continued to ask if her boyfriend was treating her well. Se-yoon was getting more and more uncomfortable, but she was afraid of appearing rude, so she reluctantly answered her boss. Tae-yoon looked thoughtfully out the window and suddenly asked what girls considered a good attitude. He wondered to himself what this guy had done to make Se-yoon be with him. Se-yoon felt relieved. She thought he was asking her about relationships because he was having problems with his own girlfriend and wanted to figure out how to proceed. She thought it was very nice of him. She said a guy should be helpful and considerate. The man listened to her intently and then asked if she loved her boyfriend and if he was doing exactly what she was saying now. Tae-yoon noticed that the girl was surprised by his question, blushing slightly. He stared at her intently and wondered what kind of person it was that had Se-yoon's love. Looking at this girl, he thought that if she loved him, this man was definitely a lucky man. After thinking for a while, Se-yoon said yes. Suddenly, the man asked the driver to pull over. Se-yoon thought it was a long way from this place to the restaurant. The man said he had forgotten an important matter and needed to go urgently. Se-yoon thanked him and said that she would go further on her own. Tae-yoon smiled strainedly and wished her a good day, signaling that she should hurry up. Her answer had upset him a little. The girl stepped outside and was finally able to breathe freely. She thought about the fact that her new director had a talent for making people feel embarrassed. Se-yoon was walking down the street and thinking about how lucky she was to be dropped off. It turned out the restaurant wasn't that far away, and it was nice to walk around for a bit. Finally, she saw Hee-wook waiting for her. The girl ran happily toward him, worried if he had waited long. The man was surprised that she had walked so much and helped her wipe the sweat from her forehead with his handkerchief. Suddenly, the man said he had a favor to ask of her. He hadn't told anyone that she was the donor for his mom, so he asked her to keep it quiet. Se-yoon was shocked. She didn't understand why he was acting like that. Hee-wook kept telling her to keep silent, saying that she would feel bad if everyone knew about it. Hee-wook beckoned her to enter the restaurant, then turned around and asked if she was offended by his request. Se-yoon thought, how could he do that to me after all I went through for him? She was very hurt. The man looked at her strangely and asked what was wrong. She followed him and wondered if he really loved her. She doubted it. She had to force herself to smile so as not to ruin the evening. At the restaurant, she was introduced to everyone as Hee-wook's girlfriend. All his friends said they'd been wanting to meet her for a long time. The couple was a little shy from the attention. Se-yoon finally met Hyun-ji. She really did turn out to be very beautiful and friendly. Hyun-ji offered to introduce her to all her friends. They all turned out to be very pleasant. The table was bursting with all kinds of food. Even though there was a cheerful atmosphere with everyone chatting and laughing, Se-yoon felt awkward. She felt like an extra. Hyun-ji started asking Se-yoon about her job. The girl talked about where she worked and what she did. Hyun-ji, who had already had a few drinks, asked Se-yoon to fix her refrigerator since she was so good with gadgets. Se-yoon felt that the girl was mocking her. It was unexpected and unpleasant, but she couldn't reply. Hyun-ji leaned on Hee-wook and started flirting with him. From the outside, it looked like the two of them were very close. Se-yoon thought it was time for her to leave. She was just about to talk to Hee-wook when he suddenly got up and said he had an important call to make. Se-yoon looked at him with annoyance. She sat and thought that she had come in vain. Suddenly, someone tapped her on the shoulder. Hyun-ji offered her a drink. Hee-wook's co-workers cheered her up, asking her to have a drink with them. She remembered how Hee-wook asked her not to talk about the fact that she was a donor. She had not yet fully recovered and had no intention of drinking, but she didn't want to seem rude and agreed to have a drink. Hyun-ji was surprised that the girl agreed so easily. Se-yoon was handed a glass of soju. She took a sip and was surprised at how good it was. It had been so long since she had a drink, she had missed that flavor. Suddenly, someone loudly called at her. Hee-wook stood against her and burned her with his gaze. A tipsy coworker suggested he join them for a drink, but Hee-wook told Se-yoon to immediately leave the table and follow him. On the street, the man started scolding Se-yoon for drinking. The girl said she only took a sip and didn't want to be rude to her friends, but he continued to lecture her. Hee-wook said she shouldn't have been drinking, worried it would make her sick. Se-yoon thought that if he had told his friends the truth about the surgery, the drinking situation wouldn't have happened. She wondered what kind of relationship he had with Hyun-ji since she was acting like that. The man said it was time for her to go home and offered to call a cab. Se-yoon understood that Hee-wook was treating her rudely, but she didn't like to fight. She said she would say goodbye to her friends and go home herself. She said goodbye to everyone, while Hyun-ji followed the couple with her eyes. She watched as Hee-wook escorted his girlfriend and jealousy burned her from the inside. She didn't understand what he found in someone like this girl. Tae-yoon finished another business meeting, said goodbye to his partners, and headed to his car. The driver met him and opened the door, but Tae-yoon said he wanted to drive himself. He got in his car and drove away. He was very tired as he had worked all day and then attended several business meetings. He understood the need for these meetings, but he didn't like discussing personal matters instead of work issues. Tae-yoon suddenly remembered how himself had recently asked Se-yoon personal questions. He felt a little embarrassed at his behavior, especially for asking if she had a boyfriend. He thought that such a beautiful girl should have one. He hadn't originally planned to talk to her about such mundane things. He was just curious as to why she had gotten a job at K-Group. He was surprised that she answered him so sincerely. Taejun thought that with his status, he could just ask for her file, but he didn't understand why he wanted to ask her about other things. It was strange. Without realizing why, the man found himself at the restaurant Se-yoon had told him about. Entering the restaurant, Taejun asked for a table for one. He noticed a large group of people drinking and having fun. Among them, he saw the man he recognized as Se-yoon's boyfriend. But why wasn't the girl herself around? She had said she was going to have dinner with her boyfriend, but it turned out to be a corporate dinner. Taejun didn't understand why she had come here at all. She obviously didn't fit in. Then he realized he had come here specifically to see her, which made him feel uncomfortable. Taejun left the restaurant disappointed. He thought he could have gone to another business meeting instead of coming here. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice calling to him. Se-yoon sat at a table outside a convenience store and cheerfully waved her ice cream while shouting his name across the street. Taejun took a quick look at the girl. It was obvious she was drunk. He felt embarrassed that she was drawing so much attention to herself. He headed toward her and asked why she was sitting there alone. So-eun looked sadly at her ice cream and replied sincerely that everyone had abandoned her today. Taejun remembered dropping her off earlier. Since she was sitting here alone while her boyfriend remained at the restaurant, he assumed the man had left her behind. He felt guilty and apologized for dropping her off so far away, but the girl said she was actually grateful to him. So-eun thanked him again for the grilled eel rice, her favorite dish. "Should I buy you more?" Taejun asked. He liked the way she got excited about food. So-eun, not fully understanding his intentions, immediately showed him a photo on her phone proving she had already ordered the same dish for herself. Taejun leaned his head on his hand, thinking about how naive she was. He listened to her admire the delivery service, noting how much she had changed since they were kids. Suddenly, So-eun confessed that he had scared her a lot that morning. She thought he would do something bad to her, but then added that a man who buys her lunch couldn't be truly evil. Taejun cringed. How could anyone be so gullible? He began lecturing her, telling her she shouldn't judge people based on trivial favors. Even an evil person could buy someone lunch. So-eun bowed her head sadly. She whispered that she just wanted to be able to trust someone. She was depressed, thinking about how she had gladly given a part of herself, her own liver, hoping her loved one would be happy. She felt it was her own fault for being so desperate to be loved unconditionally. Taejun realized she was deeply unhappy and had sacrificed far too much for an unworthy man. Her quiet confession felt like a cry from her soul. Eventually, Taejun stood up, knowing that when she sobered up, she would regret telling him all this. But then So-eun offered to tell him why she really got a job at K-Group. Taejun sat back down, curious. So-eun stared at him and replied, "There was no reason." Taejun was shocked. As he sat in a daze, the girl explained that K-Group was simply a dream job for comfort. He couldn't believe it was that simple. Did she really know nothing about what her father had done 20 years ago? Suddenly, So-eun teased him, hinting he only became director because of his connections. This stung Taejun's ego, and he began defending his Ivy League education, but So-eun just stared with a glazed, drunken look. In that moment of bickering, Taejun truly recognized his childhood friend. He jumped up, accusing her of laughing at him. So-eun cried out that she was indeed drunk, otherwise she wouldn't dare speak to her boss this way. She yelled that she had been waiting for the moment she could finally drink alcohol again. Taejun admitted defeat. She was definitely drunk. He felt a wave of pity for her. He realized she truly didn't remember him. Few people remember life at age 7, especially after being apart for 20 years. When he went to get his car to take her home, he returned to find her gone. The only thing left on the table was her glasses. Taejun looked at them, wondering how she would get home without them. He smirked, thinking, why not play with her a little more, just like when we were kids? The next morning, So-eun woke up in a panic. She searched for her glasses but couldn't find them, so she put in her contact lenses. As memories of her shameless behavior with the director flashed back, she felt like she was going crazy with shame. At the office, So-eun was so embarrassed she literally hid under her desk when she saw Taejun arrive. Her colleague, Bo-bae, eventually helped her out. Just then, a courier arrived with a massive bouquet of flowers and a hangover cure for So-eun. The card said the sender was Hee-wook. So-eun was touched, thinking she had been wrong to resent him, and sent him a text saying she loved him. In reality, Hee-wook was baffled. It was Haeyeonji who had sent the flowers. She told Hee-wook she did it on his behalf to make So-eun feel better, but in truth, she was brewing an insidious plan. She began flirting with Hee-wook, asking him to let her call him Oppa. Hee-wook, blinded by Haeyeonji's beauty and connections, began to regret his involvement with So-eun, seeing her only as a tool for his mother's health. Taejun walked briskly toward his office in high spirits. He asked his secretary to call So-eun to his office, adding, "Tell her not to hide under the table anymore." When So-eun entered, her head was bowed low. Taejun stood close to her and asked, "Don't you have something to tell me?" So-eun apologized for her behavior, but Taejun told her to forget it. He noticed she wasn't wearing her glasses and teased her about whether they were expensive. When she mentioned they were a gift from her boyfriend, Taejun's expression darkened. He felt a surge of jealousy. Abruptly, he announced her reassignment. She was to be the manager of a new future service team, working entirely alone in a small office. So-eun felt depressed, certain he was bullying her so he could fire her later. Later, So-eun fixed a phone for a grateful customer who gave her a sweet drink as a thank you. The small gesture cheered her up, and she determined to work hard despite her new lonely position. Meanwhile, at Hee-wook's law firm, Hee-wook and Haeyeonji were called to meet an important new client. To Hee-wook's shock, the client was Taejun. Taejun introduced himself as the heir to K-Group. Hee-wook was overjoyed, imagining his career skyrocketing. However, as Taejun left, he overheard Hee-wook and Haeyeonji flirting. It was clear to him that they were mutually attracted, and his suspicion of Hee-wook's character was confirmed. So-eun went to the hospital to visit Hee-wook's mother. The woman wasn't happy to see her, and the atmosphere was cold. Suddenly, Hee-wook's sister, Hae-jin, entered. She didn't even say hello to So-eun and began complaining that the transplanted liver must have been weak or unhealthy because her mother was taking a long time to recover. So-eun stood there as if struck by thunder. She had given up a part of her body for this woman, and now they were mocking her health. When Hee-wook arrived, instead of defending So-eun, he joined his sister in complaining that the porridge So-eun had cooked tasted weird. So-eun finally snapped. She told them if they didn't like her cooking, they should do it themselves. She grabbed her bag and walked out, leaving them in bewilderment. Outside, Hee-wook chased her, but So-eun refused to stay. Taejun, who happened to be at the hospital, hid nearby and witnessed the fight. He finally realized why So-eun had taken a month of unpaid leave, not for a vacation, but to take care of her boyfriend's mother after a transplant. He was disgusted by how Hee-wook treated her like a servant. Monday morning, Taejun informed So-eun she was returning to the mobile service department. So-eun was happy to be back with her friends, Bo-bae and Jang Eun-hyo. However, Taejun added a condition: she had to return to his floor every evening to continue working on the future team project until 9 p.m. So-eun felt like her soul was leaving her body. Though she was being paid for overtime, she had no personal life left. Her colleague, Bo-bae, praised Taejun, thinking he was a nice person, but So-eun began to suspect he was actually a bully. She decided to use the late hours to study English so she could eventually find a better job and leave. Taejun sat with his longtime secretary, Moonong. She mentioned that So-eun was working late every night, and even skipping dinner. Taejun compared So-eun to a puppy he once had that followed the first person it met, even if that person was mean. He wondered why So-eun followed Hee-wook so loyally. Secretary Moonong asked if he would recognize that puppy if he found it again after many years. Taejun replied that to him, it would still just be his puppy. After a successful presentation to shareholders, Taejun thought about So-eun waiting for him on his floor. He felt sorry for her, but he believed keeping her at work was better than letting her go back to the hospital to be mistreated by Hee-wook's family. Finally, Taejun visited his grandfather, who warned him to be careful. Success brings many enemies. His grandfather praised him for meeting so many potential companions, but advised that Taejun should learn not to let them get too comfortable around him. The man also mentioned he had heard Taejun had started actively working on recruiting employees from abroad, offering his praise. Taejun was surprised but relieved, as he had feared his grandfather would scold him for it. An aide approached and announced that the president had to attend a meeting. He said goodbye to his grandson and told him to call if necessary. Taejun bowed politely and said goodbye. Suddenly, Taejun was called out loudly by someone. It was his uncle, the part-time president of the mobile business department. He looked the young man over from head to toe and remarked that he looked very good after so many years. The man went on to say that Taejun was becoming more like his father as he aged, then suddenly added that his father had died when he was only 40 years old. Such a careless mention upset and alarmed Taejun. The manner in which it was said sounded suspicious. The uncle patted Taejun on the shoulder, saying he was glad they were working in the same company and promising to ask the bosses to be more lenient with him. Taejun thanked him and told him not to worry. Kim Sang-dok continued, saying the theory his nephew was learning was different from actual practice. He had seen many talented people from elite universities fail to achieve anything. He patted Taejun's shoulder once more, telling him to do his best not to tarnish his grandfather's name, then waved goodbye. Suddenly, his aunt's voice sounded nearby. She said with disgust that his uncle was acting like a child despite his age. She told Taejun to ignore him, noting that the company's success was only possible because Taejun's father had laid a solid foundation. She told her nephew to let her know if the man crossed the line, promising she would deal with him. Taejun smiled and asked what she would do. The woman replied that she would remove his uncle's wig in public. Taejun burst out laughing. His aunt laughed too and invited him to dinner. Taejun thought for a moment but declined, saying he still had work to do, promising to join her another time. So-eun was exhausted and fell fast asleep at her desk. Entering her office, Taejun was aback. He thought she didn't look like someone who should be working overtime. He decided not to wake her and quietly pulled back a chair to sit. On the table, he noticed a collection of English tests and realized she was studying for an exam. Was she really planning to leave the company? Taejun propped his cheek on his hand and watched her. She was fast asleep, her hair sprawled across the table and her eyelashes fluttering. She was beautiful. Suddenly, her phone screen lit up. Taejun saw a text from her boyfriend, Hee-wook, asking why she hadn't answered him all week. Taejun grabbed the phone and, feeling selfish, decided to try and unlock it. He wondered what combination So-eun might have set. He tried and succeeded. She's so naive, he thought. As the phone unlocked, it felt like it was teasing him to explore. He froze, then jumped up and started pacing the office. Taejun felt angry, not understanding how she could be so careless. She was an engineer, after all. Such negligence was a stain on the KG Group's reputation. He went back to his seat, grabbed her phone, and deleted the last text messages from the bastard. He returned the phone to its place and exhaled with relief. He didn't want So-eun to run back to that guy again. Suddenly, he heard a deep sigh. He looked at So-eun, her cheeks were flushed and she sniffled. He felt guilty, thinking it was his fault she was so exhausted. So-eun opened her eyes. Not fully awake, she didn't realize where she was until she saw her desk. She started frantically packing her things and grabbed her phone. Her eyes ached because she had fallen asleep wearing contact lenses. Suddenly, she heard gurgling sounds as if someone was playing a game. Taejun was sitting next to her, calmly playing on his phone. So-eun was speechless and frightened. Taejun mentioned it was 11 p.m. and said he stayed because it wasn't safe to leave her alone. So-eun felt guilty for making the director stay late. Taejun, as if reading her mind, asked if his time was as valuable as hers. So-eun was indignant, asking if he only stayed because she was working late. Taejun replied with an impenetrable face that her argument was weak and she needed to learn how to debate. He suddenly changed the subject, asking with a smirk if her relationship with her boyfriend had improved. So-eun immediately realized he must have overheard them, her and Hee-wook, arguing at the hospital. She felt uncomfortable that the director had witnessed such a private moment. Taejun stood up and told her to get ready, he would take her home. So-eun felt awkward and said she'd call a cab, but Taejun smiled and told her she shouldn't refuse when someone showed concern. He promised not to drop her off halfway like last time. As they walked to the car, Taejun asked if she had eaten dinner. So-eun lied and said she had eaten at the office. Taejun didn't believe her and said he hadn't eaten yet. So-eun felt uneasy, thinking he was going to do something strange again, but then she noticed he looked haggard. She realized if he hadn't stayed late because of her, he would have eaten by now. So-eun remembered she had a sandwich in her bag. She had bought 2 earlier but had 1 left over. She started rummaging through her bag but hesitated, fearing he would make smug jokes. Taejun asked what she was looking for. She tried to refuse, but Taejun noticed the sandwich and asked if she was going to offer it. So-eun was embarrassed. He said cheerfully that he didn't usually eat that kind of food, confirming her fears. However, he suddenly reached out and took the sandwich without permission. "I'll take it since you wanted me to eat it," he said with a smile. So-eun stood there with her mouth open, amazed by his smugness. Taejun drove her home as promised. So-eun was touched by his attentiveness, but wanted to leave the car quickly. Taejun looked at the dark alleyway leading to her house and said it looked dangerous. So-eun glared at him, thinking it was his fault she was home so late. Suddenly, her phone vibrated. It was Hee-wook. So-eun wanted to get out to answer, but Taejun asked if she had already made up with her boyfriend. She snapped that she didn't have time for a relationship because she was always busy with the work he gave her. Taejun grinned like a Cheshire cat, pointing out that if she really wanted to, she'd find a minute to call him. So-eun defended Hee-wook, saying he worked a lot too. Taejun countered that if that were true, making up wasn't a priority for either of you. So-eun felt defeated by his logic. Taejun continued to press her, asking if he was so extraordinary, why was she hesitating to answer him? Their conversation felt like a duel. He asked why she was even dating him if he wasn't great. So-eun replied that she chose him because they were right for each other. Taejun disagreed. Deep down, So-eun knew he might be right, and her voice trembled. She yelled that he had it all wrong based on what he heard at the hospital, that she and her boyfriend were like family. Taejun asked if being family meant she had to sacrifice herself to take care of his boyfriend's mother. So-eun remembered taking a vacation just to care for Hee-wook's mother after surgery. She realized she had been taken advantage of, and tears came to her eyes. She told Taejun she didn't want to discuss this with him. Despite her anger, she told Taejun she knew she could rely on him, but would understand if he didn't like her because she caused him so much trouble. Taejun reached up, brushed her hair back, and wiped a tear from her cheek. So-eun felt a momentary warmth. Then Taejun said, "I really like people like you, with no opinion of their own, ready to do whatever others tell them to." Hurt by the remark, So-eun thanked him for the ride and jumped out of the car. She hurried up the stairs, determined to prove him wrong and decide her own fate. The next day, Hee-wook sat in his office wondering why So-eun hadn't responded. Usually, she was the first to apologize. He was worried because he needed her to take care of his mother in the hospital so he wouldn't have to do it himself. When his phone finally vibrated, he answered with indifference, telling her to talk fast because he was busy. So-eun said she called because she missed his calls. Hee-wook claimed she hadn't answered his texts. When So-eun replied she hadn't received any, Hee-wook became alarmed. He worried someone had deleted them, specifically the texts regarding the transplant surgery. He decided he needed to get her a new phone to ensure no information leaked. He immediately changed his tone, apologized, and suggested they meet over the weekend. So-eun immediately melted and apologized as well. He then offered to meet a wedding planner and have lunch at a hotel. So-eun perked up and agreed. Hee-wook began planning how to trick her into giving him her phone. He also thought about how he wanted to get her to a hotel, as he found her body attractive. He figured that if things didn't work out with Hyunji, So-eun wasn't a bad backup option. His musings were interrupted by Hyunji, who stood in his office with tears in her eyes. She reproached him for not noticing her. When Hee-wook tried to calm her, she confessed she liked him. Hee-wook was shocked. He couldn't believe the goddess of the Yu law firm loved him. He felt he had won the lottery. He pulled Hyunji close, saying his heart was pounding and that he liked her too. She hugged him back, satisfied. Back at the office, So-eun entered Taejun's room. He was focused on work and told her to go to her desk, saying he would give her tasks later. So-eun pouted, assuming it would be a useless job. She asked if he had taken her phone the night before. Taejun looked at her like she was crazy and denied touching it. So-eun felt embarrassed. Suddenly, she thanked him for his words the previous night, saying they helped clear her mind. Taejun found it weird that she was thanking him after he brought her to tears. So-eun happily announced that they had reconciled and were going on a date this weekend. She walked away, leaving Taejun furious. He decided that if she wanted to play games, he would accept the challenge. Taejun called Hee-wook and mentioned a list of foreign talents, then asked if Hee-wook would be willing to go on a business trip to Japan this weekend for 2 nights with the lawyer Hyunji. With Hee-wook eliminated for the weekend, Taejun was pleased with himself. He decided it was time to give So-eun a real assignment. He surrounded her with a mountain of account books, telling her to reconcile the data with Excel spreadsheets. So-eun suspected he had printed them out just to bully her. As if reading her mind, Taejun asked if she thought he was making up assignments. He handed her a folder from the previous year. To her surprise, the numbers were different. It was real work. Taejun smiled innocently and told her to identify any discrepancies. So-eun was in shock. There were so many books, she feared she'd never finish. Suddenly, Taejun said that was enough for the day and suggested they go to dinner. So-eun was surprised and tried to stay and work, but Taejun took on a sad, innocent look. He sighed, saying he had recently moved and had no one to eat with. So-eun was angry but couldn't say no. In the car, So-eun blamed herself for agreeing. Taejun asked if she liked meat. So-eun was secretly drooling, but wanting the dinner to be short, said she didn't want meat or drinks. Then Taejun asked what she would like, giving her the choice. So-eun suggested fast food, but he rejected it immediately. They engaged in a silent battle of wills until Taejun asked if she liked Japanese food. So-eun agreed as the restaurant was close to work and the service was fast. As they drove, Taejun was surprisingly silent. So-eun felt awkward. She realized she had been in the car with him a lot lately and feared he would start asking personal questions again. She let out a slight hysterical chuckle. Taejun watched her from the corner of his eye, thinking she was beautiful. At the restaurant, So-eun groaned at the exorbitant prices. She chose the simplest dish, Wagyu udon. Taejun suggested sushi, which So-eun loved, but she had to decline because she couldn't eat raw food after her surgery. Taejun saw the regret on her face and realized she was lying. He closed the menu, apologized for picking the wrong place, but So-eun hurried to assure him she loved udon. Taejun looked at her carefully and said he would remember that. He ordered 2 Wagyu udon. So-eun was surprised he chose the same as her, but he simply replied that he ordered what he wanted. So-eun sat there thinking about how strange he was, always making her uncomfortable, yet now taking her to dinner. She wondered what he was up to this time.
Suddenly, she thought maybe he really didn't have any friends to have dinner with. That's why he was so upset. With his frequent mood swings, like a personality disorder, it was likely. Also, So-eun noted that the man was very interested in her and Hee-wook's relationship. He probably had problems on the love front, too. Suddenly, the girl found herself even feeling sorry for the CEO. Such a successful man also had areas in which he could not succeed. Taejun watched the girl carefully and couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. All evening long, she had been grinning or crying. Now he saw her eyes glisten with tears, but she suppressed them. Then he remembered his plan and smirked. The man thought to himself that he couldn't wait to see the look on her face on Sunday. It was quite late when the young people left the restaurant, so Taejun said he would take the girl home. He thanked her for the pleasant company. So-eun was a little surprised. This was the first time they had really talked exclusively about work. She didn't expect them to have a normal evening like this. Getting into the car, the girl thought that she shouldn't let her guard down after all. He could do something at any moment. Suddenly, the girl's cell phone rang. It was Hee-wook. She wondered if she should answer it now. Knowing how the CEO reacted to her boyfriend, she didn't want to disrupt the fragile peace they had. But then the girl decided that this was her chance to show the man that she and her boyfriend had a good relationship, that he was wrong. So-eun apologized and asked if it was okay if she answered the phone. Taejun didn't mind. The girl got excited and decided to speak as cheerfully as possible. Hee-wook asked her if she had made it home and had dinner or not. The girl said she was late at work, but she was fine. The man said he had something to tell her, but before he could say anything, Taejun suddenly started coughing loudly throughout the car. So-eun felt uncomfortable, covered her phone with her hand, and asked the guy what he wanted to say. At the same time, the director continued to cough loudly. The girl quietly wondered if he was all right, but the man only waved her away. Hee-wook wondered what those sounds were in the background, but the girl said to ignore it. She asked what he wanted to tell her. Taejun listened intently. He already knew what the guy was going to tell her. Hee-wook said he was going on a business trip for 2 days, which meant their date was cancelled. So-eun was very disappointed as she had hoped that they would be able to spend time together. And as if that wasn't enough, the guy asked her to take care of his mom while he was gone. The girl, barely holding back tears, agreed and wished him a good trip. Taejun saw how depressed So-eun was, but still asked if her boyfriend had cancelled on her again and asked her to babysit his mother. The girl felt lousy. It all came down to him bullying her relationship again. Suddenly, instead, the man asked if she needed his help. The girl didn't expect this. Taejun asked if she would like to work on the weekend and grinned. He said she could go home early tomorrow and come out to work this weekend and he'd pay her overtime. The girl didn't let him finish and said it was okay and she wanted to take care of Hee-wook's mother herself. She was shaking with anger and humiliation, but she didn't want to admit it to him. The man was surprised. He gripped the steering wheel tightly with indignation. Taejun wondered how it was possible that in 20 years she had never changed. She still had no self-respect and no opinion. But on Sunday, it'll all be over. He stared angrily at the road and said that in that case, she would have to work late tomorrow as usual. The girl nodded her head tiredly and sadly. On Saturday morning, So-eun was already in her future mother-in-law's hospital room. The woman was surprised to see her and asked why she had come so early on her day off since she worked so hard. The girl was pleased that, despite the previous incident, Hee-wook's mother was nice to her, so she decided that her son had talked to her. So-eun inquired about the woman's health, and she replied that the doctor said she was on the mend. The girl was genuinely glad to hear that, when suddenly the door to the hospital room opened. She didn't turn around. She recognized the visitor's voice. It was Hee-wook. Along with him, Hyun-ji came with a bouquet of flowers in her hands. She greeted So-eun cheerfully. The girl said hello to Hee-wook's mother and started chatting sweetly with her. So-eun stood there wondering when the two of them had gotten so close. The man asked why she had come since she was supposed to be working. The girl felt uncomfortable, like she was being treated as a superfluous person. Hyun-ji suddenly turned to her and asked her to fetch water for the flowers. The girl was confused. She took the flowers and headed for the restroom. So-eun poured water into the vase and wondered how it was that Hee-wook had come to visit his mom because he said he was going on a business trip, and why he had taken Hyun-ji with him. She was uncomfortable with the situation.
Back in the hospital room, she heard Hyunji happily telling the man's mother that they were going to Japan together on a business trip. The girl froze in place. Hyunji chatted cheerfully and said that when she found out that Hee-wook wanted to visit his mom before the trip, she asked to take her along because she wanted to meet her. So-eun glared menacingly at the man. He hadn't initiated her into such important details, but she decided not to make a big deal out of it. Hee-wook was standing cowardly and silent. Hyunji jokingly asked if So-eun was jealous that her boyfriend would be alone with another girl for 2 whole days, to which So-eun awkwardly replied that she should take care of him. Suddenly, Hyunji stood up abruptly and pushed So-eun with a chair and fell to the floor herself. The girl screamed and started moaning, showing she'd cut her hand. Hee-wook rushed over to help Hyunji and yelled what the hell So-eun was doing. He didn't even notice that the girl had also hit her arm and even dropped the vase of flowers. So-eun tried to explain that she had nothing to do with it, but no one would listen to her. Hyunji suddenly called Hee-wook and said she wasn't almost bleeding. So-eun was even more alarmed by this treatment and started to wonder what kind of relationship the two of them were in. Hyunji then took So-eun's hands and apologized for making a bad joke. She made it look like So-eun had intentionally hurt her. The girl stood there in shock and didn't know what to say. Hyunji moved over to her and asked with gloating in her eyes if So-eun was offended by her. So-eun stood in shock and didn't know what to say back. She didn't expect such a turn. While Hyunji continued to apologize for making a bad joke and asked if So-eun was feeling better after pushing her, Hee-wook moved toward them, wanting to help sort things out. The girl looked at him and at his mother, who turned away, seeking support from them, but realized that they considered her guilty. Suddenly, she remembered Taejun's words that she didn't have her own opinion and the strength to stand up for herself. Her gaze hardened, and she was determined to stand up for herself this time. So-eun abruptly pulled her hands out and said that the girl was wrong. She didn't do anything on purpose. They just bumped into each other when Hyunji was getting up. She looked at the girl defiantly and said that she didn't need her help with her feelings either. It sounded too presumptuous of Hyunji to declare jealousy and resentment. Later, So-eun accompanied Hee-wook and Hyunji to the car because they had to leave for the airport. The girl felt uncomfortable after the recent incident. She was afraid that Hyunji would be angry with her, but everything seemed to have been resolved. Hee-wook approached So-eun and asked her to sit with his mom for a couple more hours until his dad came over. The man was glad that she agreed and already decided to say goodbye, when suddenly the girl interrupted him. She clenched her fist tightly, gathering her courage. So-eun asked the man to tell Hyunji that she had become a liver donor for his mother. Hee-wook panicked that Hyunji in the car would hear anything and asked So-eun why she was doing this. The girl replied that she wanted to be friends with her and share it with her. So-eun said that since he's so close to her that she's visiting his mother, it wouldn't be fair to hide the truth from her. The man got angry, started yelling that she had started this conversation on purpose to ruin his mood before his business trip. He changed his face and suddenly said with anger that So-eun was petty and always reminded him about the transplant. He said that if he had known she was so smug, he would have refused her help. Hee-wook then exhaled and began to apologize for what he had said. But So-eun just walked by and walked away without saying a word. Later, So-eun went to work at the office. The girl was trying to fix one more gadget. Taking things apart and fixing things had always been her passion. It calmed her down and helped her to put her thoughts in order. She was proud of herself for standing up for herself today and finally speaking her mind. Suddenly, she saw the director walking by and called out to him. Taejun was surprised and stopped. He thought who might be working on a Saturday afternoon at the office. The man asked why she came to work because it was a day off. Did she want to get bonuses? The girl replied that she just wanted to work. He looked at what the girl was doing and said it didn't look like the future service team's tasks. Also, K Electronics did not allow its employees to work weekends unnecessarily. So-eun couldn't say that she came to work just to distract herself, and replied that he was at work at the same time as well. Taejun replied that he is the CEO and they are not in the same position. He took a closer look and asked why she was fixing an old folding phone, since it was stupid to use one like that. So-eun bit her lip and said that sometimes fixing things is more important than throwing them away. She said that this is the phone of her regular client, a grandfather who is over 80 years old and has neither the desire nor the opportunity to purchase a new phone. Besides, it's hard for old people to master smartphones, so she will try to fix this phone for him. The girl didn't know why she was telling the man all this. To her surprise, Taejun told her to try hard, but he asked her not to overexert herself so that she wouldn't get sick. So-eun was very pleased and surprised by his approval, but suddenly she felt dizzy. Taejun continued to talk about the dangers of overwork when he realized that she was not responding to him. The girl clenched her fists tightly and tried to hold back her tears. She tried to understand how he managed to be there for her in difficult moments. She wanted him to stop being so sympathetic and just leave. But instead, the man squatted down in front of her and called her name. Tears ran down her cheeks. She looked straight at Taejun when he said that he could see how hard it was for her. The man looked at her sincerely and sympathetically and asked her to tell him what happened. He promised to listen to her carefully. Taejun sat down and looked at the girl carefully. He asked her to tell him what was wrong. So-eun stared at him in surprise. Since she was silent, the man assumed that she had another fight with her boyfriend, and the girl immediately blushed. So-eun sighed heavily and nodded her head faintly. She was embarrassed that the CEO was right again. The man suddenly cheered up and offered to help her scold him. The girl stared at him for a while and then suddenly laughed and tried to cover her mouth with her hand. Taejun didn't realize what funny thing he had said. He asked why she was laughing and said he could give him a good scolding if he needed to. So-eun couldn't hold back any longer and was already laughing at the top of her voice. The girl calmed down a bit and thought that the CEO was right when he said that she shouldn't be afraid to speak her mind. If there are things she is not satisfied with, she should find the cause of the problem and solve it. As in the case of gadgets, she decided that she would try to make things right like she always does. The girl smiled and thanked the man for his support, saying that everything was fine and she had just misunderstood her boyfriend. The man looked at her seriously and asked would she really do it again? Would she take the blame again? He said she shouldn't do anything until her boyfriend treats her with the respect she deserves. Full of desperation, he grabbed her arm. Taejun stared at her in anticipation. The girl stared into his eyes in amazement, embarrassed by the unfolding scene. Suddenly, So-eun said she was in pain and asked the man to let her go. The man didn't even realize he'd grabbed her, staring at their hands. The girl broke free from his grip, mumbled that she would finish fixing the phone some other time, and rushed to the exit. She was in a hurry to leave and didn't even turn around, thinking to herself what the hell just happened. Taejun stared at her without saying a word. He knew that her eyes would soon be opened. It was already late evening in Tokyo. The city lit up with millions of lights. Hewook and Hyunji had finished a business meeting. The girl was fluently conversing with the client in Japanese, while the man stood by and didn't understand a word. He marveled that she knew so many languages, was smart and beautiful. She was definitely the type of girl he liked. Suddenly, he remembered how So-eun had asked him before the trip to tell Hyunji that she was a liver donor for his mother. On the way to the hotel, he thought about how sensitive she was about his business trip. He wondered how he could break up with her. Even at the hotel check-in, he couldn't help but wonder what to do if the information about the donation came out. He was afraid that So-eun would demand money from his family or go to a lawyer. As he entered the room, he continued to ponder how he could break up with her without even noticing Hyunji following him. The man was absorbed in his thoughts when the girl turned to him. She pulled him to her and asked him not to think about So-eun. She looked him in the eyes and asked him how he could think about someone else when she was around him. Hyunji moved forward and kissed Hewook. Hewook became excited and began to roam his hands over the girl's body.
Suddenly, the girl pulled away and told him not to expect anything more than a kiss. The man was taken aback, asked why. She looked at him menacingly and said that he had to break up with So-eun first, and only then would they pick up where they left off. The man stared at her and felt fear. He didn't count on her forcing him to make a choice. Hyunji grabbed him by the neck and playfully scolded him. She laughed at him, saying that he was afraid of the responsibility. Hewook protested and thought to himself that the girl was very cunning. The girl continued to hold him and repeated that she didn't want him to see So-eun anymore and demanded that he break up with her as soon as he returned to Korea. The man was surprised at her assertiveness. He hadn't expected her to act so quickly. She asked him if everything was okay and if he had anything against breaking up with So-eun. Hewook was visibly tense, trying to think quickly. He should have told her that So-eun was the liver donor for his mother, but he didn't want to. He just said that his mother liked Hyunji better than So-eun and would be happy that they are together now. The girl shone with happiness. She snuggled closer to him and told him she wanted to be a couple of lawyers. She offered to break the news to his mother when they got back. She was sure she'd be happy to hear it. The man was pleased with himself. He thought about how happy his mom would be that he had managed to seduce such a girl. On Monday morning, So-eun went to the hospital to visit Hewook's mom. She was walking and thinking about the fact that the man had not called or texted her once all weekend and was probably busy. The girl decided that she would take care of the woman as she had promised her boyfriend, despite their quarrel. When she entered the room, she said hello. Hewook's sister was inside with her son and said that mom was still asleep. Unexpectedly, the young woman apologized to So-eun for her behavior in their last encounter. The girl was numb with shock, not expecting her to apologize to her. Her future sister-in-law told her son to say hello to his future aunt. So-eun, surprised at such friendliness, said hello back. The boy said hello and said his name was Hyungu. He was a rosy-cheeked, sweet child with big, kind eyes and smiled sincerely at the girl. Suddenly, the woman's cell phone rang and she said she had an urgent need to answer it, so she asked So-eun to look after the boy and left the room. The girl looked at the boy with interest. It was the first time she had seen him. She noted that he didn't look like his mother, so he was probably like his father. She thought he must be very bored because the hospital had no entertainment for children. She smiled awkwardly and tried to make conversation with him, asking him which of his parents he thought he looked more like. The boy glowed. He was at the age where he wanted to brag about everything. He answered that he looked like his father, but his arms and legs were long like his mother's. Then he enthusiastically said, "They all have the same blood type. His father and mother and he have exactly the same blood type." The girl stared at the boy in shock. She thought, what the hell is going on?